A mountain man found twin girls left by their stepmom, unaware they'd become his everyday miracle. Snow whips across the Colorado highlands. A rugged man pushes open his cabin door and freezes. Two little girls sit trembling in the snow, clutching nothing but a ragged shawl and a note that says, "They are not mine. Let the wilderness take them." He takes them in, thinking it's only for one night. But these twins aren't ordinary children. They can trap rabbits, whisper prayers at supper, and sing hymns that silence a whole town. Just when hope begins to stir in his lonely cabin, the sheriff arrives with papers. The girls are to be torn away, sent to an orphanage, and then one falls deathly ill. With the law against him and prejudice rising all around, the mountain man must decide, will he obey the rules or fight for the family he never asked for but can't let go? Can one broken man and two abandoned children defy the wilderness, the law, and the weight of the past to find a miracle of their own? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered ground as Sam Holt made his way back to his line shack. His boots crunched through the fresh powder, leaving a solitary trail behind him. The day's work had been decent enough. 2 beaver pelts and a handful of rabbit skins hung from his belt, though the real prize was the plump hare he'd caught in his last trap of the day. The wind whistled through the pines, carrying the bite of winter's approach. Sam pulled his worn coat tighter around his broad shoulders, his breath forming clouds in the crisp mountain air. The familiar sight of his small, log shack came into view, smoke still rising from the stone chimney where he'd banked the morning's fire. Sam's calloused hands worked quickly to secure his day's catch, hanging the pelts on the drying rack beside the cabin's eastern wall. The hare would make for a good stew tonight, he reckoned, something to warm his bones after a long day on the trapline. He settled onto the rough-hewn bench by his door, pulled out his skinning knife, and set to work. That's when he heard it. So faint, at first he thought it might be the wind playing tricks. But there it came again. A whimper, soft and frightened, like a wounded animal. Sam's hands stilled on the knife. His eyes, sharp from years of tracking, scanned the tree line. The sound came once more, clearer this time. Sam set down the hare and stood, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle slung across his back. He followed the noise, his steps careful and measured, until he reached a large spruce tree not 30 paces from his cabin. What he found there stopped him cold. 2 tiny figures huddled together beneath the low-hanging branches, their small bodies pressed close for warmth. Twin girls, he realized with a start, neither of them more than 6 years old. Their feet were bare despite the snow, their clothes thin and inadequate for the mountain cold. One clutched a threadbare shawl to her chest while the other held something in her trembling hands, a piece of paper, folded and crumpled. Sam's throat tightened. He'd seen enough of life's cruelties in his years on the frontier. But this was something else entirely. He crouched down, trying to make himself less imposing to the frightened children. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you here." The girls stared at him with matching pairs of dark eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Neither spoke, but the one with the paper held it out to him with a shaking hand. Sam took it carefully, unfolding the worn sheet, to reveal a message written in hasty scrawl. "They are not mine, let the wilderness take them." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. His jaw clenched as he read them again, anger rising in his chest at whoever could abandon 2 innocent children to such a fate. He looked back at the girls, noting their bluish lips and trembling forms. Without another moment's hesitation, Sam tucked the note into his coat pocket and held out his arms. "Come on then," he said gently. "Let's get you warm." The girls hesitated only briefly before their need for warmth overcame their fear. Sam lifted them both, one in each arm, surprised at how little they weighed. Their small bodies were ice-cold against him as he carried them the short distance to his cabin. Inside, the fire had burned low but still gave off welcome heat. Sam set the girls down carefully on his single wooden chair, positioned close to the hearth. He added more logs to the fire, watching from the corner of his eye as the twins huddled together, their eyes taking in every detail of his simple home. The cabin wasn't much. One room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed pushed against one wall, shelves lined with preserved foods and hunting supplies. But it was warm and dry, and right now, that's what mattered most. Sam moved to his cooking pot, still hanging from its hook above the hearth. There was enough leftover broth from his morning meal to fill 2 tin cups. He heated it quickly and brought it to the girls, who accepted the cups with trembling hands. "Drink slow now," he cautioned, watching as they sipped carefully at the warm liquid. Some color began to return to their cheeks as the broth did its work. From his bed, Sam retrieved his prized buffalo robe, thick, warm, and large enough to wrap around both small bodies. He draped it over their shoulders, tucking it carefully around their feet. The girls clutched at the edges, pulling it tight around themselves. As the night deepened outside, Sam busied himself with small tasks, stoking the fire, preparing his planned supper, stealing glances at his unexpected guests. The twins remained silent, watching his every move with those solemn eyes. He wondered what horrors they'd seen to make them so quiet, so frightened. The hair would have to wait until morning for skinning. Instead, Sam prepared a simple meal of cornbread and more broth, making sure the girls ate their fill before taking any himself. They consumed the food carefully, methodically, as if unsure when they might eat again. As the evening wore on, exhaustion began to show clearly on their small faces. Sam gave up his bed without hesitation, helping them settle onto the thin mattress, still wrapped in the buffalo robe. They curled together like kittens, their dark heads close together on his single pillow. Sam settled himself in his chair by the fire, telling himself he'd figure out what to do with them come morning. But as he watched their sleeping faces in the flickering firelight, something stirred in his chest, something he hadn't felt since he'd lost his Sarah and their baby to the fever 3 years past. The girl's presence brought back memories he'd tried hard to bury, dreams of the family he'd once hoped to have, the love he'd lost too soon. He'd chosen solitude after that, finding peace in the simplicity of his trapper's life. But now, watching these abandoned children sleep in his bed, he felt the walls he'd built around his heart begin to crack. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. He'd need to figure out who they were, where they came from, what to do with them. But for tonight, they were safe and warm, and somehow, that seemed like enough. The fire crackled softly as Sam kept his vigil, the wind whistling outside a reminder of what these children had been saved from. Their steady breathing mingled with the familiar sounds of his cabin, the settling of logs, the pop of burning wood, the distant cry of a night bird. Sam's last thought before sleep claimed him in his chair was of the note in his pocket. "Let the wilderness take them," it had said. Well, the wilderness had taken them all right, taken them straight to his door. And something deep inside told him that maybe, just maybe, that wasn't by chance at all. Morning crept over the mountains, bringing with it a bitter cold that traced delicate frost patterns across the cabin's small windows. Sam stirred from his uncomfortable position in the chair, his joints protesting the night spent upright. The fire had burned low, leaving only glowing embers in the hearth. His first instinct was to reach for his rifle, as he did every morning, but the soft sounds of breathing from his bed stopped him. The events of the previous night came rushing back as he looked at the 2 small forms still curled beneath his buffalo robe. As if sensing his gaze, the girls began to stir. They sat up together, their dark hair tousled from sleep, eyes wide as they took in their surroundings in the pale morning light. Sam cleared his throat, uncertain how to begin. "Reckon you girls might be hungry," he said, keeping his voice gentle. The twins nodded in unison, and one of them, the slightly smaller one, spoke up. "I'm Martha, sir," she said softly. "This is my sister Eliza." Sam nodded, grateful to have names for the children. "Well then, Martha and Eliza, let's see about some breakfast." He moved to his storage shelf, pulling down a sack of flour and some preserved apple butter he'd traded for in town. It had been years since he'd made flapjacks, but he remembered Sarah's recipe well enough. As he worked at mixing the batter, the silence of his usual mornings gave way to something entirely different. The girls slipped from the bed, still wrapped in the buffalo robe, and moved closer to watch him work. Their whispered conversations and occasional giggles filled the cabin with unfamiliar sounds. Mama used to make flapjacks too, Eliza offered, her voice small but clear. Before she went to the spirit world. Sam's hand stilled for a moment. Your mama? She was Sheena? He asked carefully, noting their features that spoke of mixed heritage. Martha nodded. She taught us lots of things before she died. How to find berries, how to make cordage from plant fibers. Her face brightened slightly. We can even snare rabbits. That so? Sam couldn't hide his surprise. These little ones were more capable than he'd first assumed. Eliza nodded eagerly. We could show you, Mama said, knowing how to get food was important, but her voice faltered. After she died, our stepmother didn't want us anymore. Sam's jaw tightened as he poured batter onto his hot griddle. The story was becoming clearer and sadder. She's the one who left you out there? The girls fell silent, but their downcast eyes told him everything. Sam focused on flipping the flapjacks, giving them a moment to collect themselves. When he placed the warm food before them, Martha automatically folded her hands and bowed her head. Creator, she whispered, thank you for this food and for Mr. Sam who helped us. Amen. Sam stood frozen, the simple prayer hitting him like a physical blow. How many times had he watched Sarah do the same, her head bowed over their table? The memory, usually so painful, felt different now, like a gentle reminder instead of a sharp regret. As the girls ate, Sam tried to maintain his resolve. He couldn't keep them. He was a solitary trapper, not a father. The Indian agency was only half a day's ride away. They'd know what to do with 2 half-Sheena orphans. But watching them eat, seeing how they helped each other cut the flapjacks and shared the apple butter equally between them, made something in his chest ache. These weren't helpless babes. They were survivors like him. Mr. Sam? Eliza's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Could we really show you how we make snares? Mama said it's important to share knowledge. Before he could think better of it, Sam found himself nodding. He followed them outside, where the morning sun had begun to warm the air. The girls worked together with surprising skill, their small fingers weaving grass into sturdy cordage just as their mother had taught them. See? Martha demonstrated the trigger mechanism of a simple snare. The rabbit goes like this, and then she made a quick gesture with her hands. That's mighty fine work, Sam admitted, impressed despite himself. These children knew more about survival than many grown men he'd met. The morning stretched into afternoon as the girls showed him other skills their mother had taught them. How to identify useful plants, how to move quietly through the woods, how to read animal signs. Their knowledge was a mixture of Sheena wisdom and practical frontier sense, much like Sam's own hard-earned experience. As evening approached, Sam found himself cutting extra firewood, stacking it higher than usual against the cabin wall. He told himself it was just good sense with the cold weather coming, but deep down, he knew he was preparing for more than just tonight. Inside the cabin, the girls had already settled themselves near the hearth, their small bodies wrapped once again in his buffalo robe. They watched him with those solemn eyes as he prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread. Mr. Sam? Martha's voice was hesitant. Are you sending us away tomorrow? Sam sat heavily in his chair, studying the flames. The responsible thing would be to take them to the agency in the morning. They'd find somewhere for the girls to go, some proper family to raise them. But the thought of those officials, with their cold eyes and stacks of papers, made his stomach turn. Just rest now, he said finally, unable to give them an answer. We'll sort things out tomorrow. The girls seemed to accept this, huddling closer together as the fire crackled. Soon their breathing deepened into sleep, leaving Sam alone with his thoughts and the dancing flames. He sat there long into the night, wrestling with his conscience. The smart choice, the logical choice, would be to take them to the agency. But as he watched them sleep, remembered their prayers and their skills and their quiet strength, he wondered if smart and right were always the same thing. Sarah would have known what to do. She always had a way of seeing straight to the heart of matters. Sam could almost hear her voice, gentle but firm. Sometimes, love, the good Lord puts people in our path for a reason. The fire burned low as Sam kept his vigil, the weight of decision heavy on his shoulders. Outside, an owl called into the night, its cry echoing across the silent mountains. Inside, 2 orphaned girls slept peacefully. unaware that their future hung in the balance of one man's troubled heart. The morning frost had barely melted when Sam began hitching his mule to the wooden sled. Every movement felt heavy, weighted with the decision he'd made during his sleepless night. The girls watched from the cabin doorway, wrapped in the buffalo robe he'd given them. "Best get your boots on," he said quietly. "We're heading to the agency." The twins exchanged worried glances but did as they were told, helping each other lace up their worn boots. Sam had stuffed them with dry grass to keep their feet warm against the bitter cold. He lifted them onto the sled, tucking wool blankets around their small forms. The mule snorted, its breath forming clouds in the crisp air as Sam urged it forward. The road stretched ahead, half buried under fresh snow that had fallen during the night. The sled runners cut fresh tracks through the white expanse, the only sound the creaking of wood and the mule's steady breathing. "Mama used to sing when we traveled," Martha said suddenly, breaking the silence. "She knew lots of songs." Sam glanced back at them, noting how they huddled together for warmth. "That so? What kind of songs?" "Songs about the land," Eliza answered, her voice brightening. "And about the animals." She said every creature has its own medicine, its own story. "Like the deer," Martha added eagerly. "Mama showed us how to thank them proper when we hunted. She'd sing a special song while she cooked the venison." Sam adjusted his grip on the reins, intrigued despite himself. "Your mama taught you about hunting too?" The girls nodded in unison. "She showed us which parts were best for drying," Eliza explained, "and how to use every piece so nothing was wasted." "The hide makes good moccasins," Martha chimed in, "and the sinew makes strong thread. Mama could sew anything." As they continued their slow journey, the twins took turns sharing memories of their mother. They told Sam about gathering herbs in the spring, learning which plants could heal and which could harm. They described how she taught them to read weather signs in the clouds and find north using the stars. "Sound like your mama was a wise woman," Sam said softly, something in his chest aching at their obvious love for her. "She was the best mama," Martha agreed, her voice growing quieter. "She said as long as we remembered what she taught us, she'd always be with us." The 10-mile journey stretched longer than usual, the deep snow forcing them to move at a careful pace. By the time the agency building came into view, the sun had climbed high in the sky. The structure stood stark against the white landscape, all sharp angles and weathered wood. Sam helped the girls down from the sled, noting how they gripped each other's hands tightly as they approached the building. Inside, a clerk sat behind a high desk, barely glancing up as they entered. "Yes?" The man's voice was as cold as the wind outside. Sam cleared his throat. "Found these two out by my place yesterday. They were abandoned dash." "Names?" The clerk interrupted, pulling out a thick ledger. "Martha and Eliza," Sam answered, resting a protective hand on each girl's shoulder. "Their mother was Sheena. She passed recently." The clerk made a note in his book, his pen scratching against the paper. "We'll arrange transfer to the mission orphanage. Should have space in about a week." Sam's jaw tightened. "Orphanage? These girls have skills, knowledge of their people's ways." "Standard procedure for cases like this," the clerk cut in. "Half-breed children need proper Christian upbringing." Sam felt Martha tremble beneath his hand. "Now wait just a minute," he said, fighting to keep his voice level. "These girls are capable, well-taught. Surely there's family." "There is mention here," the clerk said, flipping through another book with obvious impatience, "of a grandmother. Lives on Sheena land. But those claims take months to process, if they're processed at all." He shrugged, already turning back to his other work. "The mission will take them next week." "Good day." Sam stood rooted to the spot, anger burning in his chest at the man's dismissal. He looked down at the twins, saw the fear in their eyes, and made his decision. "Much obliged for your time," he said stiffly, turning the girls toward the door. Outside, he lifted them back onto the sled, tucking the blankets around them with extra care. The return journey was quieter, heavy with unspoken worries. The sun began its descent, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and purple. As they passed a stand of frost-covered pines, a rabbit darted across their path, making Martha laugh in delight. The sound warmed something in Sam's chest, reminding him of another laugh, long ago. Sarah would have loved these girls, he thought. She would have known exactly what to do. The last light was fading as they approached his cabin. Sam helped the exhausted girls inside, building up the fire while they huddled close to its warmth. He watched them as he prepared a simple supper, their small faces serious in the firelight. He'd spent the return journey thinking hard about what lay ahead. Taking in these children would put him at odds with the law, no doubt about that. The agency clerk's coldness made it clear they'd face a hard path. But watching Martha and Eliza share a cup of hot tea, helping each other blow on the steaming liquid just as they helped each other with everything else, Sam knew he couldn't send them away. These girls were survivors like him. They carried their mother's wisdom, their people's knowledge. He'd be damned if he'd let some mission strip that away from them. As the girls settled into their makeshift bed by the fire, Sam added another log to the flames. Tomorrow, he'd need to start planning. They'd need proper beds, more supplies, warmer clothes, and somehow, he'd have to find a way to reach their grandmother. But for tonight, watching their peaceful faces in the firelight, he allowed himself to feel the rightness of his decision. The law might not be on their side, but Sam Holt had long ago learned that there was a difference between law and justice. Sometimes a man had to choose which one to follow. The morning sun cast long shadows across Sam's cabin floor as he demonstrated the proper way to split kindling. Martha and Eliza watched intently, their small faces serious with concentration. He'd found a lighter hatchet that fit their hands better, though he still worried about them using it. Always keep your fingers well away from the blade, he explained, showing them how to hold the wood. And never rush. Better to take your time than get hurt. The girls nodded solemnly. Sam had noticed they approached every task with the same careful attention their mother must have instilled in them. They weren't like most children he'd known, wild and careless. These two had already learned life's harder lessons. Like this? Martha asked, positioning a small piece of wood on the chopping block. Sam adjusted her grip slightly. That's right, now remember what I showed you about the swing. She brought the hatchet down with precise control, splitting the wood cleanly. Her face broke into a proud smile, and Sam couldn't help but return it. Well done, he said softly. Your turn, Eliza. The days fell into a rhythm Sam hadn't known since Sarah passed. Each morning, the girls helped with chores, feeding the chickens he'd traded for last week, carrying water from the creek in buckets sized for their small hands. They spilled more than a little at first, but they never complained about the work. Mama always said every job worth doing takes practice, Eliza told him one morning, after her third trip to refill a half-empty bucket. It was during the quiet evenings that Sam found himself learning from them. They knew songs he'd never heard before, gentle melodies in their mother's tongue that made the cabin feel less lonely. Sometimes they'd sing while helping him prepare supper, their sweet voices mixing with the bubbling of the stew pot. This was Mama's favorite, Martha said one night, teaching him a lullaby about stars falling like snow. She said her mama sang it to her when she was little. Sam listened, something in his chest aching at the simple beauty of the tune. He caught them watching him sometimes, when they thought he wasn't looking. Their eyes held questions he wasn't sure how to answer. That evening, as Sam stirred the stew, he noticed Martha and Eliza automatically folding their hands before eating. The gesture struck him hard, reminding him of Sarah's quiet faith. She'd never missed saying grace, even during the hardest times. He hadn't stepped foot in a church since her funeral. The girls bowed their heads, waiting. After a moment's hesitation, Sam cleared his throat. Would you like to say the blessing? Their faces brightened. Together, they recited a simple prayer their mother had taught them, mixing English words with Sheena phrases. Sam found himself bowing his head too, their innocent faith stirring something long buried in his heart. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. Sam surprised himself by announcing they'd attend service in town. The girls helped each other dress in their cleanest clothes, faded calico dresses he'd managed to obtain from a passing trader. He hitched the mule to his wagon instead of the sled, the road having cleared enough to make it passable. The log church sat at the edge of town, its small bell calling the faithful to worship. Sam felt eyes on them as he helped the girls down from the wagon. Whispers followed their progress up the wooden steps. Those must be the Indian twin Orca, living with that mountain man Holt. Ought to be at the mission? Sam's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral for the girls' sake. They pressed closer to his sides as they entered the church, their small hands gripping his tightly. The interior smelled of pine sap and lamp oil. They found seats near the back, where the girls could see the altar with its simple wooden cross. Sam noticed how naturally they folded their hands in their laps, back straight, eyes forward. Their mother had clearly taught them more than just wilderness skills. The service passed in a blur of familiar hymns and scripture readings. Sam found himself remembering Sarah in the choir, her voice clear and true. The girls sang too, their sweet voices joining the congregations with surprising confidence. After the final Amen, several women approached them bearing wrapped biscuits and curious looks. "Welcome to our church," Mrs. Peterson said, handing Martha a still warm package. "We're always glad to see new faces." "Much obliged," Sam replied stiffly, uncomfortable with the attention. "Such pretty girls," another woman commented, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Will you be bringing them regular?" Before Sam could answer, he heard Jed Turner, the storekeeper, speaking loudly to another man. "Ain't natural, if you ask me. Wild blood shouldn't be raised by a white man. Bound to cause trouble." The twins pressed closer to Sam's legs, their earlier confidence vanishing. He felt Martha tremble slightly against him. "Time to head home," he said quietly, guiding them toward the door. He nodded thanks to the women with their biscuits, but didn't slow his pace. Outside, more whispers followed them to the wagon. Sam lifted the girls up more quickly than necessary, his hands gentle despite his anger. They remained silent on the ride home, the wrapped biscuits untouched in their laps. The cabin welcomed them back with familiar comfort. Sam built up the fire while the girls changed out of their church clothes. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, painting warm squares on the plank floor. "Come here," he said softly, settling into his chair by the hearth. The twins approached hesitantly, and he helped them climb onto his lap, something he'd never done before. "Those people in town," he began carefully. "Some of them don't understand about families being different from their own, but that don't make them right." "Mama said that too," Eliza whispered. "She said some people's hearts are closed up tight, like pine cones before the fire opens them." Sam smiled at the image. "Your mama was a wise woman." "Do we have to go back to church?" Martha asked, her voice small. Sam considered the question seriously. "Not if you don't want to. We can say our prayers right here if you prefer. God hears us just fine in this cabin." The girls relaxed against him, tension easing from their small shoulders. They sat together as the fire crackled, watching the flames dance. After a while, Martha began humming one of their mother songs. Eliza joined in, and then, surprising himself, Sam did too. The sound filled the cabin, weaving with the firelight and the lengthening shadows. Sam knew there would be more whispers, more disapproving looks. Taking in these children had set him against more than just the law. He was challenging the town's deep-seated prejudices too. But feeling the twins' trust in his arms, hearing their mother's song in their voices, Sam knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for, even if you had to stand alone. They shared the church biscuits with their supper that night, and Sam listened as the girls taught him more of their mother's songs. Outside, snow began falling again, soft and steady. But the cabin was warm with something more than just firelight. The storm rolled in just before dawn, bringing thick curtains of snow that turned the world outside white and silent. Sam woke to find drifts piling against the cabin door, the wind whistling through tiny gaps in the logs. He'd seen storms like this before. They could last for days. "Looks like we're staying put for a spell," he told the girls as they peered out the frosted windows. The twins pressed their faces to the glass, watching fat snowflakes swirl past. "It's like sugar falling from the sky," Martha said, her breath fogging the pain. Sam built up the fire and pulled out his neglected wool carding tools, 2 paddle-shaped boards covered in small metal teeth. He'd traded for a bag of raw wool last fall, meaning to work on it during the long winter evenings, but it had sat untouched until now. "Want to learn something new?" he asked, settling near the hearth. The girls crowded close, curious about the strange implements. "These here are carding paddles," Sam explained, demonstrating how to pull the tangled wool between the teeth. "It helps make the fibers straight and clean before spinning." He worked slowly, letting them see how the wool gradually became softer and more organized. "Can we try?" Eliza asked, reaching for one of the paddles. "Careful now, the teeth are sharp." Sam showed them how to hold the tools properly, guiding their small hands through the motions. Gentle-like, just like brushing hair. The girls took to it naturally, working together with quiet concentration. Martha would card a section, then pass it to Eliza for a second pass. Soon they had a neat pile of fluffy wool ready for spinning. "Mama used to weave," Martha said suddenly, her hands still moving steadily. "But with bark and grass, not wool. She made the prettiest baskets." "That's so?" Sam kept his voice casual, though his heart squeezed at the mention of their mother. They spoke of her often, keeping her memory alive in small ways. "We can show you one of her games," Eliza offered, setting down her paddle. She gathered a handful of smooth pebbles from the hearth, ones they'd collected from the creek bed days earlier. The game involved arranging the stones in intricate patterns while singing a counting song in their mother's language. Sam struggled with the unfamiliar words, but the girls were patient teachers, correcting his pronunciation with giggles. "No, like this," Martha would say, then demonstrate the proper way to shape the sounds. By evening, Sam could manage a rough version of the song, though his accent made the girls laugh every time. The storm raged through the next day, keeping them confined but content. They carded wool, played pebble games, and shared stories. Sam found himself telling tales from his own childhood, stories he hadn't thought about in years. When the storm finally broke on the third morning, Sam realized their supplies had dwindled considerably. The flour barrel was nearly empty, and they'd used the last of the coffee 2 days ago. "Time for a trip to town," he announced, checking his stack of furs. He had enough prime pelts to trade for what they needed. "Bundle up warm. It's a fair piece in the sleigh." The girls helped each other into their warmest clothes, wool stockings, sturdy boots, and thick shawls. Sam had modified some of his old shirts into makeshift coats for them, and though the fit wasn't perfect, they were warm enough. The world outside was transformed. Fresh snow lay deep and unmarked, glittering in the morning sun. Sam hitched the mule to the sleigh, adding extra blankets and heating stones wrapped in flannel to keep their feet warm. The twins settled into the sleigh bed, tucked snugly under buffalo robes. Brass bells on the harness jingled merrily as they set out, the runners cutting clean tracks through the pristine snow. Main Street was busy when they arrived, townspeople taking advantage of the clear weather to conduct their business. Sam helped the girls down from the sleigh, noting how conversations hushed as they passed. Folks still stared, but he held his head high, a protective hand on each small shoulder. The mercantile was warm and crowded, smelling of coffee beans and leather. Sam nodded stiffly to Jed Turner behind the counter, then began sorting through his furs while the girls explored the store's treasures. "Look," Martha whispered to her sister, pointing to a shelf of colored glass bottles. Sunlight through the window struck them, casting rainbow patterns on the floor. Something about the dancing lights reminded them of their mother's favorite hymn. Without planning it, they began to sing, their clear voices rising pure and sweet above the store's usual bustle. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped. People turned to stare. But this time, the looks were different, softer, touched by something in the girl's song. Sam recognized the tune. It was Amazing Grace, but sung partly in English, partly in the Sheena tongue. The twins' voices wove the languages together beautifully, creating something new and haunting. Even Jed Turner's hard expression changed as he listened. The storekeeper's eyes dropped to his ledger, but Sam caught the way his shoulders relaxed, the stern line of his mouth gentling. When the song ended, silence held for a moment. Then Mrs. Peterson, the preacher's wife, spoke up. "What a lovely arrangement. Your mother taught you that?" "Yes, ma'am," Martha answered shyly. "She said music speaks to everyone's heart, no matter what words are used." "Your mother was right about that," Mrs. Peterson said warmly. She turned to Sam. "You must bring them to sing for our Christmas service." Before Sam could respond, other customers pressed forward with kind words and smiles. The twins answered politely, their earlier nervousness fading as they basked in the unexpected approval. Even Jed Turner seemed different when Sam approached to trade his furs. The storekeeper's usual curt manner had softened somewhat. "Fine quality pelts," he said, examining them. "I'll give you fair price." He hesitated, then added gruffly, "Them girls got good voices. That they do, Sam agreed quietly. Their trading concluded more favorably than Sam had expected. He was able to get everything they needed: flour, coffee, sugar, and even some peppermint sticks that made the girls' eyes light up. The sun was setting as they loaded the supplies into the sleigh for the journey home. The twins chattered excitedly about their success in town, certain they'd made new friends. "Did you see how Mrs. Peterson smiled at us?" Martha asked, unwrapping a peppermint stick. "And Mr. Turner wasn't scary at all today," Eliza added. "I think he liked our song." Sam listened to their happy conversation, allowing himself to share their optimism. Maybe they had won some hearts today. Maybe there was hope for acceptance after all. The sleigh bells rang cheerfully through the gathering dusk as they headed home. Stars were just beginning to appear in the deep blue sky, and the snow sparkled like diamond dust in the runner's path. Looking at the girls' happy faces in the fading light, Sam felt pride swell in his chest. They'd faced the town's prejudice with nothing but sweet music and innocent faith, and somehow, that had been enough to begin melting the ice. The twins huddled closer under the buffalo robes, still sucking on their peppermint sticks. Their breaths made little clouds in the cold air as they continued to chat about their adventure in town. Sam let the mule set an easy pace, enjoying the moment. The sleigh bells kept time with his thoughts, ringing clear and bright through the crisp night air. For now, at least, all seemed right with their small world. Morning dawned crisp and bright, the fresh snow gleaming like a blanket of diamonds under the winter sun. Sam stood at his chopping block, the steady rhythm of his axe echoing across the valley. Each stroke sent wood chips flying, the sharp scent of split pine hanging in the cold air. Not 20 paces away, Martha and Eliza worked together, rolling snow into increasingly larger balls. Their laughter rang clear as sleigh bells, punctuated by excited chatter as their snowman took shape. "Papa Sam," Martha called out, "come see how tall he's getting." Sam's hands faltered on the axe handle. There it was again, that name they'd started using. Papa Sam. The first time he'd heard it, he'd nearly dropped his coffee cup. Now it warmed him like a cup of hot cider on a cold day. "Just let me split these last few logs," he called back, watching as Eliza tried to lift a snowball nearly as big as herself. The girls had transformed his quiet homestead. Where silence had ruled for years, now there was song and laughter. Even his old line shack seemed different, warmer somehow, despite the winter chill. The twins had hung paper snowflakes in the windows, and their small boots by the door made the cabin feel lived in, like a real home. Sam finished his chopping and stacked the wood neatly against the cabin wall. He turned to find the girls struggling with the snowman's head, both giggling as they tried to lift it together. "Need a hand there?" he asked, moving to help. "Yes, please," they chorused. Sam lifted the snowball carefully, settling it atop the other two. The girls immediately set about decorating their creation, using pine cones for eyes and a curved stick for a mouth. "He needs a hat," Eliza declared, looking up at Sam with hopeful eyes. Sam untied his old wool scarf and wrapped it around the snowman's neck instead. "There now. That'll keep him warm." The girls beamed, proud of their handiwork. They spent the next hour playing around their snowy friend, making snow angels and having friendly snowball fights. Their joy was infectious, and Sam found himself joining in more than once, his deep laughter mixing with their lighter tones. As the afternoon light began to fade, Sam herded them inside to warm up. The cabin welcomed them with the smell of bean soup simmering on the stove. While Sam stirred the pot and cut thick slices of cornbread, the twins set their small table with careful precision. "Smells mighty fine," Martha said, trying to mimic Sam's way of talking. It made him smile. They settled in to eat, the girls remembering to fold their hands in prayer first. Sam bowed his head with them now, though the words still felt rusty on his tongue. Eliza looked up at him as they finished their blessing. "Papa Sam," she said softly, almost shyly, "will you tell us a story tonight? About when you were little?" That name again, Papa Sam. It struck deeper this time, lodging somewhere between his heart and his throat. He thought of his own father, gone these 20 years now, and how he'd told stories by firelight just like this. "Reckon I could do that," he managed, his voice gruff with emotion. After supper, they gathered by the hearth. The twins snuggled under a quilt, while Sam settled into his old wooden rocker. The fire painted everything in warm shades of gold and amber, making the cabin feel like its own small world. Sam told them about his childhood in Kentucky, about catching fireflies in mason jars and learning to fish in clear mountain streams. The girls listened with rapt attention, asking questions and giggling at his descriptions of getting into mischief with his brothers. As the evening wore on, their eyes grew heavy. Sam helped them prepare for bed, making sure they were warm enough in their small bunk. He watched as they drifted off, their faces peaceful in sleep. For a long while, he sat by the fire thinking about how completely these two small souls had changed his life. The walls he'd built after losing Sarah and their infant son had seemed impenetrable. Yet somehow, these girls had slipped right through, bringing light and warmth back into his world. Sam stood and moved closer to the fire. For the first time in 10 years, he felt the need to pray properly, not just bowing his head at mealtimes, but really talking to God. "Lord," he began hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I ain't been much for prayer these past years. Reckon I was too angry, too hurt." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But these girls, Lord, they need someone to care for them, to protect them. I'm asking for the strength to be that someone." The fire crackled softly as he continued. "I know I ain't perfect. Made plenty of mistakes in my life. But please, if you're listening, help me keep these little ones safe. They're good girls, Lord. They deserve a chance at happiness." Just as the last words left his lips, the sound of approaching hoofbeats cut through the night. Sam straightened, his prayer forgotten, as he moved to the window. Through the frost-etched glass, he could make out a familiar figure on horseback, snow dusting the brim of his hat. Sheriff Barlow. Sam's heart sank as he opened the door. The sheriff's expression was grave as he dismounted, clutching a handful of official-looking papers. "Evening, Sam," Barlow said quietly, mindful of the late hour. "Mind if I come in?" Sam stepped back, allowing the lawman inside. The sheriff removed his hat, shaking off the snow. His face looked tired in the firelight, and Sam could tell he wasn't happy about whatever brought him here. "Coffee?" Sam offered, though he dreaded what was coming. "No, thank you, this won't take long." Barlow glanced toward the sleeping girls, then back to Sam. "Got word from the agency today. Papers came through about the twins." Sam's hands clenched involuntarily. "What papers?" The sheriff pulled out the documents, his movements reluctant. Agencies made their ruling. The girls are to be transferred to the mission orphanage. He paused, then added heavily, "Within 3 days' time." The words hit Sam like a physical blow. The warmth seemed to drain from the cabin, despite the crackling fire. He looked at the sleeping twins, so peaceful in their bunk, and felt something crack inside his chest. 3 days? His voice came out rough. That's not enough time. Their grandmother? The claims process is too slow. Barlow cut in, though not unkindly. Agency won't wait. They say the girls need proper schooling. He hesitated. Integration. Sam turned to stare into the fire, its cheerful light suddenly seeming dim and cold. Just hours ago, he'd been playing in the snow with the girls, feeling like a family. Now that fragile happiness lay shattered at his feet. "I have to leave these with you," Barlow said, setting the papers on the table. "I'm sorry, Sam. Truly I am." Sam didn't respond, couldn't respond. He kept his eyes on the fire, listening as the sheriff made his way to the door. The sound of hoofbeats fading into the night seemed to echo the hollow feeling in his chest. From the bunk came the soft sound of peaceful breathing. The twins slept on, unaware that their world was about to change again. Sam sank into his chair, the firelight catching the tears that tracked silently down his weathered face. The papers on the table seemed to mock him, their official seals glinting in the firelight. 3 days. How could he tell them? How could he watch their trust in him break when he explained he couldn't protect them after all? Sam sat there long into the night, watching the fire slowly die down to embers, as cold and gray as his hopes had become. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cabin floor, but its warmth couldn't pierce the heaviness in Sam's heart. He moved through his morning chores like a man walking through deep water, each step deliberate, but weighted. The twins noticed his mood, exchanging worried glances when they thought he wasn't looking. Martha appeared at his elbow as he stoked the fire, holding out a handful of perfectly shaped pine cones. "Look what we found, Papa Sam. This one looks just like a star." Her small face beamed up at him, hopeful. Sam forced his lips into a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's real nice, Martha." He took the pine cone, turning it in his rough hands. "Reckon it does look like a star." Eliza bounded over with her own collection, but her excitement was interrupted by a sharp cough. Sam glanced up, noticing for the first time how flushed her cheeks looked. "You feeling all right, little one?" He reached out to touch her forehead, but she ducked away, eager to show him her treasures. "Look at mine, too." She held up her pine cones, coughing again. This time the sound was deeper, rattling in her chest. Throughout the day, Sam kept a worried eye on Eliza. She grew quieter as the hours passed, her usual energy dimming like a candle running low on wax. By late afternoon, she'd curled up in his old rocker, wrapped in a quilt, despite the warm fire. Martha hovered near her sister, their twin bond evident in her anxious expression. "Papa Sam," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Eliza's not feeling good." Sam knelt beside the rocker, pressing his palm to Eliza's forehead. His stomach clenched at the heat radiating from her skin. The girl's eyes were glassy, her breathing shallow and quick. "Just tired," Eliza mumbled, but another cough shook her small frame. Sam moved swiftly to his herb stores, gathering willow bark for tea. His hands shook slightly as he added honey to mask the bitter taste. "Drink this down, sweetheart. It'll help with the fever." Eliza sipped obediently, but by nightfall the tea seemed to have little effect. Her cough grew worse, each bout leaving her gasping. Sam carried her to the bunk, piling extra quilts around her shivering form. Through the long night, Sam sat vigilant beside the bunk. Martha refused to sleep in the other bed, curling up next to her sister instead. The cabin filled with the sound of Eliza's labored breathing, punctuated by harsh coughs that seemed to tear at her chest. Near midnight, Sam changed the cool cloth on her forehead for the 12th time, his worry mounting as he felt the heat of her skin. The fever wasn't breaking. If anything, it was climbing higher. When the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, Sam made his decision. Eliza's face was flushed scarlet, her breathing ragged. They couldn't wait any longer. "Martha, get your coat on," he instructed, already wrapping Eliza in every blanket he could find. "We're going to town." The morning air bit fierce and cold as Sam saddled his old mule. He fashioned a makeshift sling across his chest to hold Eliza secure against him, then lifted Martha up behind. The girl's arms wrapped tight around his waist as they set out. The journey into town seemed endless. Every jolting step drew a whimper from Eliza, and Sam's heart clenched at each sound. The sun had barely cleared the mountains when they finally reached the church, where the preacher and his wife kept house. Sam's urgent pounding brought Mrs. Fletcher to the door, her gray hair still in its nighttime braid. One look at Eliza's feverish face had her ushering them inside. "Bring her here quickly," she directed, leading them to a small bedroom off the parlor. "Thomas, fetch my medicine chest," she called to her husband. Sam laid Eliza gently on the bed, reluctant to break contact. Mrs. Fletcher's capable hands were already checking the girl's pulse, feeling her forehead, listening to her breathing. "How long has she been like this?" she asked, efficiently unbuttoning Eliza's coat. "The cough started yesterday evening. Fever got bad through the night." Sam backed away, letting the woman work, his hat twisted nervously in his hands. "I tried willow bark tea, but—" "You did right to bring her in." Mrs. Fletcher's voice was kind but focused. "This sounds like it's settling in her chest. We'll need to break that fever and ease her breathing." Sam found himself ushered into the parlor, Martha clinging to his leg. Through the open door, he could see Mrs. Fletcher mixing medicines, hear her murmuring soothingly to Eliza. The preacher appeared with a steaming kettle, and soon, the sharp smell of medicinal herbs filled the air. The waiting was torture. Sam paced the small parlor, his boots wearing a path in Mrs. Fletcher's rug. Martha sat quietly in a chair too big for her, watching him with solemn eyes. Every cough from the bedroom made them both flinch. The morning crept by. Mrs. Fletcher emerged occasionally to fetch fresh water or different herbs, her expression giving nothing away. Sam's questions met with gentle but firm responses. "We're doing all we can." "Have faith." Faith. The word echoed in Sam's mind as he paced. He'd had precious little of that these past years. But now, watching the sun climb higher in the window, he found himself praying with every step. "Please, Lord." Please not again. Don't take another child from me. Near noon, Eliza's voice drifted weakly from the bedroom. Papa Sam? He was through the door in 2 strides, kneeling beside the bed. Eliza's face was still flushed with fever, but her eyes found his, focused and afraid. Don't let go, she whispered, her small hand reaching for his. Sam's chest constricted so tight he could barely breathe. He gathered her tiny fingers in his calloused palm. I'm right here, little one. Papa Sam's right here. The words came naturally now, no hesitation. This was his daughter. Both of them were his daughters, law or no law. Looking at Eliza's trusting face, feeling Martha press against his side, Sam knew with bone-deep certainty that he would die before he let anyone take them from him. I ain't letting go, he promised softly, smoothing Eliza's damp hair back from her forehead. You rest now. I'll be right here when you wake up. Mrs. Fletcher moved quietly around them, adding more herbs to the steaming kettle, but Sam barely noticed. His world had narrowed to the feel of Eliza's hand in his, the sound of her breathing, the absolute conviction in his heart. No piece of paper could make him more their father than he was in this moment. No law could be stronger than the love that had crept into his heart, turning his solitary life into something rich with purpose. These girls were his to protect, his to raise, his to love. And no force on earth would take them from him. Dawn painted the church windows with pale gold as Sam stepped out onto the porch. His bones ached from sleeping in the hard parlor chair, but he wouldn't leave Eliza's bedside until her fever finally broke near midnight. Now she rested peacefully, Martha curled beside her like a faithful pup. Preacher Fletcher stood at the porch rail, his breath making clouds in the frigid morning air. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Sam, he said quietly. Perhaps he sent those girls to heal more than just your solitude. Sam leaned against a weathered post, his eyes on the rising sun. Been wrestling with that thought myself, preacher. First time I've prayed proper in years was asking to keep them safe. Then maybe it's time to take that faith and put it to work. Fletcher turned to face him. You must appeal to the agency, Sam. Show them the girls have living kin, their grandmother on the reservation. The law may be cold, but even it recognizes blood ties. The words struck Sam like a bell ringing clear. Of course, the grandmother. The clerk had mentioned her, dismissed her claim as too lengthy to pursue, but with someone fighting for it. Reckon you're right. Sam straightened, purpose filling his chest. Mrs. Fletcher can watch over Eliza? Sarah won't leave her side, the preacher assured him. Take what time you need. Sam strode to the stable where he'd left his horse. The animal nickered softly as he entered, steam rising from its flanks in the cold. He worked quickly, checking the cinch and stirrups. His fingers, stiff with cold, fumbled slightly with the bridle. Before mounting, Sam pulled his old Bible from his saddlebag. He'd carried it for years out of habit, rarely opening it. Now he held it tight, drawing strength from its worn leather cover. The book had seen him through darker times than this. It would see him through again. The sun had barely cleared the mountains when Sam rode out of town. His breath frosted in the air, and his horse's hooves crunched through surface ice on the trail. The agency lay 20 miles north, normally a day's easy ride, but the winter conditions would slow him considerably. The morning wore on and the cold only deepened. Ice coated every branch, making the forest glitter like glass. Beautiful, but treacherous. Sam's horse picked its way carefully, muscles tense beneath him. One wrong step on this ground could mean a broken leg. Near midday, Sam's face felt frozen despite his heavy scarf. His hands, though gloved, had lost most feeling. When he spotted smoke rising from a familiar line cabin, he decided to risk a brief stop. The cabin belonged to old Jake Turner, a fellow trapper who'd worked these hills for decades. Jake opened the door at Sam's knock, his weathered face creasing with surprise. "Sam Holt! Ain't seen you in months. Get in here before you freeze solid." The cabin's warmth hit Sam like a physical wave. He stamped his boots and moved gratefully toward the pot-bellied stove while Jake poured coffee. Mighty grateful, Jake. Sam wrapped his hands around the tin cup, feeling returning in painful tingles. Just need a few minutes to thaw. Must be pressing business to ride out in this weather. Jake settled into his chair, watching Sam with shrewd eyes. Sam took a long swallow of coffee before answering. Got 2 little girls in my care. Agency wants to send them to an orphanage, but they've got living kin, their Sheena grandmother. I aim to make them see reason. Jake's bushy eyebrows rose. You? Taking in young'uns? Wasn't planned. Sam allowed himself a small smile. But the Lord has his own ideas sometimes. That he does. Jake nodded slowly. Well, you best get moving if you want to reach the agency before dark. Weather's fixing to turn worse by tomorrow. Sam drained his cup and stood, pulling his scarf back into place. Much obliged, Jake. Good luck with them bureaucrats, Jake called as Sam mounted up. You always were stubborn as a mule. Might serve you well this time. The afternoon brought heavy clouds dimming the weak winter sun. Sam pressed on, stopping only briefly to rest his horse. The trail grew steeper, winding through passes where the wind cut like a knife. His mount's sides heaved with effort, steam rising from its coat. Dusk was falling when Sam finally caught sight of the agency building, its windows glowing yellow against the gathering dark. He pushed his tired horse into a faster walk, determination driving him forward. The agency clerk was just pulling on his coat when Sam burst through the door, bringing a swirl of cold air with him. We're closed, the clerk said shortly. Come back tomorrow. No. Sam planted his feet, snow melting from his boots onto the wooden floor. This can't wait. The clerk sighed, recognizing him. Mr. Holt, I've already explained the situation with those Indian children. Their names are Martha and Eliza, Sam cut in, his voice hard. And they have living kin, their grandmother on the Sheena reservation. I'm here to file for their placement with her. That's not how these matters work. The clerk's tone was dismissive. The paperwork alone would take months, and there's no guarantee. Sam pulled out his Bible, letting it thud onto the clerk's desk. Says here the Lord commands us to care for widows and orphans. Those girls have family willing to raise them. You'd rather send them to strangers? The Mission Orphanage is a properly sanctioned facility. Their grandmother is proper kin, Sam insisted. She can teach them their mother's ways, keep them connected to their people. Ain't that worth more than some orphanage? The clerk adjusted his spectacles, clearly annoyed. Mr. Holt, I sympathize with your attachment to these children, but there are procedures, protocols. Then show me the procedures. Sam leaned forward, planting both hands on the desk. I'll fill out every paper you've got. I'll wait as long as it takes, but I ain't leaving until you start the process proper. Something in his tone made the clerk pause. He studied Sam's face, the stubborn set of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. The commissioner won't be here until morning, the clerk said finally. Nothing can be done tonight. Then I'll see him in the morning. Sam straightened up, settling his hat firmly. Where's your stable? The clerk pointed wordlessly toward a side door. Sam nodded once and strode out, leaving wet boot prints across the floor. The agency stable was cold but dry, filled with the familiar smells of hay and horse. Sam unsaddled his mount, rubbing it down thoroughly before settling it in an empty stall. Then he found himself a relatively clean patch of hay, wrapped himself in his heavy coat and lay down. The stable's darkness reminded him of countless nights spent in line shacks and hunting camps. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't alone in the wilderness by choice. This time he was fighting for something bigger than himself. Sam pulled out his Bible again, holding it close to his chest. The commissioner would arrive with the morning sun, bringing all his official power and bureaucratic resistance. But Sam had faith on his side now. Faith, and the love of 2 little girls who called him Papa. He closed his eyes, breathing in the peaceful, stable air. Whatever tomorrow brought, he would face it with prayer in his heart and the strength of right on his side. The girls deserved no less from the man they'd chosen to trust. Sleep came slowly, accompanied by the soft sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. Sam's last conscious thought was of Eliza's fever-bright eyes, of her whispered plea. Don't let go. I won't, he murmured into the darkness. I promise. Dawn crept over the agency buildings, painting the frost-covered windows in pale gold. Sam woke stiff from his night in the stable hay, but determination burned bright within him. He stood, brushing straw from his coat, and said his morning prayers with renewed purpose. The stable boy brought him a tin cup of coffee, steam rising in the cold morning air. Commissioner Matthews usually arrives at 8 o'clock sharp, the boy offered, watching Sam with curious eyes. Sam nodded his thanks, sipping the bitter brew while he waited. Sure enough, as the town clock struck 8, a well-dressed man trudged through the snow toward the agency door, his arms full of papers. Inside the office, Sam found the clerk from yesterday already at his desk, shooting him an irritated glance. The commissioner settled heavily into his chair, spreading documents across every available surface. Commissioner Matthews? Sam removed his hat. Name's Sam Holt. I need to speak with you about Indian affairs, yes. Matthews didn't look up from his papers. Johnson here told me you spent the night waiting. Must be important. It's about 2 little girls, sir. Twins. Sam stepped forward, gripping his hat tighter. They were abandoned near my property about 2 weeks back. Their mother was Sheena, passed on last summer. Stepmother left them to die in the cold. That got Matthews' attention. He looked up, removing his spectacles to study Sam's face. And you took them in? Yes, sir. Martha and Eliza, they're called. Sam's voice softened, speaking their names. Smart as whips, both of them. Know their letters, can sing hymns prettier than any choir. Mr. Holt Matthews sighed, rubbing his temples. I have 200 unresolved claims on my desk. Land disputes, treaty violations, missing persons. What makes your case so urgent? Sam drew himself up straighter. Sir, these girls have living kin, their grandmother on Sheena land, but your clerk here says they're bound for the mission orphanage instead. Standard procedure for abandoned Indian children, Matthews nodded. The mission provides education, proper Christian upbringing. Their mother already gave them that, Sam interrupted, then caught himself. Begging your pardon, sir. But these girls pray every night, know their Bible stories. Their grandmother could teach them their mother's ways, too. Medicine, plants, tribal history. Seems to me that's worth more than an orphanage bed. Matthews studied him for a long moment. The morning light through the window caught the silver in his hair, the tired lines around his eyes. You seem unusually invested in this matter, Mr. Holt. I made them a promise, Sam said simply. Won't break it now. The commissioner shuffled through some papers, frowning. The process for tribal placement is complicated. We'd need testimony, character witnesses, proof of the grandmother's capability to provide care, documentation of their mother's tribal membership. I'll get it all, Sam said firmly, every bit of proof you need. Matthews sighed again, but something in his expression softened slightly. Very well. I'll review the case, but only with proper testimony. Get statements from respected townspeople, church leaders if possible. Bring me evidence of the grandmother's situation, then we'll talk. It wasn't the victory Sam had hoped for, but it was a start. He nodded gravely. Much obliged, Commissioner. I'll be back with what you need. Outside, the morning had warmed slightly, though frost still glittered on every surface. Sam mounted his horse, thoughts already racing ahead to who might speak for the girl's cause. The ride back would be long, but at least the sun was with him this time. Midday found him following the familiar trail through pine-covered hills. His mount's hooves kicked up powder snow, and his breath frosted in the cold air. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made him pause, alert for trouble. But it was Reverend Miles who appeared around the bend, bundled against the cold on his sturdy mare. The preacher's face broke into a smile of recognition. Sam, the Lord's timing is surely at work here. He urged his horse alongside Sam's. I was just heading to check on you and the girls. How fares little Eliza? Better, I pray, though I haven't seen her since yesterday morning. Sam filled the Reverend in on his mission to the agency, the commissioner's requirements for testimony. Reverend Miles listened intently, nodding. When Sam finished, the preacher's eyes were bright with purpose. Brother, you shall have all the support we can muster. My wife and I will gladly testify to the girls' character and your care of them. And I believe others in the congregation will stand with us. You do that? Sam's voice roughened with emotion, even knowing it might stir up trouble. The Lord's work often does, Miles smiled. But I've seen how those children have touched hearts in our community. Even those who were skeptical at first have been moved by their faith and sweet spirits. He reached over to clasp Sam's shoulder. Ride home to your girls. I'll speak with the congregation, Gather statements from those willing to stand with you. We'll show the commissioner that this community supports keeping them with their own blood." Sam's throat felt tight. "Much obliged, Reverend, more than I can say." They parted ways, the preacher turning back toward town while Sam continued homeward. The afternoon sun warmed his back, and hope warmed his heart. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Dusk was gathering when Sam finally rode into town. Light spilled from the windows of the preacher's house, and his heart quickened as he dismounted. Before he could knock, Mrs. Miles opened the door, her face wreathed in a warm smile. Come in, someone's been watching for you all day." He barely made it through the door before small arms wrapped around his legs. "Papa Sam, you came back." Sam knelt to gather both twins close, his eyes burning as he felt their warm, solid presence. Eliza's face was cool now, no trace of fever in her bright eyes. Martha clung to his neck, whispering, "We prayed for you lots and lots." "Those prayers worked powerful well," Sam managed, his voice rough. He looked up to find Mrs. Miles watching them, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "Eliza's fever broke last night," she reported. "Nothing short of a miracle, if you ask me. Though that willow bark tea probably helped too." The girls wouldn't let go of him as he stood, one clinging to each hand. Their small fingers were warm and sure in his grasp. Together, they moved to the kitchen table, where the remains of supper still waited. "Eat," Mrs. Miles commanded, setting a plate before him. "Then you can tell us everything." Over coffee and cornbread, Sam recounted his journey, the commissioner's requirements, and Reverend Miles's pledge of support. The twins listened with wide eyes, their heads together as they absorbed every word. "Will we really get to stay with you?" Martha asked softly when he finished. "And see grandmother too?" Sam gathered them close again, breathing in the familiar scent of soap and wood smoke in their hair. "That's my aim, little ones. Got good people helping us now." Eliza's small hands folded together. "Can we pray about it?" "We surely can." Sam bowed his head as the girls' clear voices rose in simple, heartfelt prayer. Their faith wrapped around him like a warm blanket, strengthening his resolve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, holding these precious souls close, Sam knew with bone-deep certainty that he was exactly where the Lord meant him to be. Whatever it took, however long the road, he would see this through. Mrs. Miles watched them from her rocking chair, her knitting forgotten in her lap. The lamplight caught the tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. Sometimes her expression seemed to say, love was its own miracle. Outside, snow began to fall softly in the gathering dark, but inside, wrapped in prayer and purpose, Sam and his girls were warm in the light of hope. The church bell rang clear through the crisp morning air as Sam helped the twins down from his wagon. Martha smoothed her best dress while Eliza adjusted the ribbon in her hair, both gifts from Mrs. Miles. Their boots crunched on fresh snow as they made their way toward the little log church. "Remember what we practiced?" Sam asked softly. The girls nodded, their faces serious. They'd spent the evening before rehearsing their hymn, wanting it perfect for today. Inside, lamplight warmed the wooden walls. The twins drew closer to Sam as they felt curious eyes upon them. Some faces showed kindness, others doubt. They slipped into their usual pew near the back, the girls folding their hands neatly in their laps just as their mother had taught them. Reverend Miles stood at the pulpit, his Bible open before him. His gaze swept the congregation, settling briefly on Sam and the twins with gentle encouragement. As the last stragglers found their seats, he cleared his throat. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice filling the small space. "Today I wish to speak about justice, not merely the justice of man's laws, but true justice as our Lord commands it." Sam felt himself straighten. The girls sat very still beside him, sensing the weight of the moment. "In Micah 6 verse 8 we are told what the Lord requires of us," the Reverend continued. "To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Simple words, yet how often do we struggle with their meaning? He closed his Bible, stepping from behind the pulpit to address them directly. Sometimes man's laws, though well-intended, fall short of God's justice. Sometimes what seems proper and orderly in human eyes fails to serve the higher law of love. A murmur rippled through the congregation. Sam noticed Sheriff Barlow shift uncomfortably in his seat near the front. Consider the story of Moses, Miles went on. By man's law, by Pharaoh's decree, he should have perished in the Nile. Yet God had other plans. Through the courage of his sister, the compassion of Pharaoh's daughter, that child was saved. Not just saved, but raised to become God's instrument of liberation. The Reverend's eyes found Sam's again. Today we have among us a similar choice between man's law and God's justice. Two precious children, born of two peoples, blessed with two traditions of faith. By man's reckoning, they should be sent away to strangers, but I ask you, is that God's justice? Martha's small hand slipped into Sam's. He squeezed it gently. These girls have living kin, a grandmother who shares their heritage, their mother's wisdom. They have found a guardian whose love for them reflects our Father's own care for his children. Are we to tear them from this providence simply because it doesn't fit neatly into our human systems? The Reverend's voice softened. I have watched these children pray. I have heard them sing praise to God in two traditions. I have seen how they've brought light to a lonely man's life, and how he has given them the security of a father's love. Tell me, is there not more of God's justice in this than in any official decree? Sam blinked hard against the moisture in his eyes. Beside him, Eliza leaned against his arm, her face peaceful. After the service, Miles concluded, Brother Sam will speak to us about these matters. I ask you all to listen with open hearts, remembering that our Lord's justice flows from love, not from rules carved in stone. The usual hymns followed, though Sam barely heard them through the pounding of his heart. Too soon, the final Amen was spoken. Reverend Miles gestured for him to come forward. Sam squeezed the girl's hands before rising. His legs felt wooden as he walked to the front, turning to face the congregation. Dozens of faces looked back at him, some friendly, some uncertain, some openly hostile. He cleared his throat. Never been one for public speaking, he began roughly. But some things need saying, even if saying them comes hard. Taking a deep breath, he told them everything. Finding the twins in the snow, learning their story, watching them bring life and faith back to his empty home. His voice grew stronger as he spoke of their mother's teachings living on through them, of their grandmother waiting on Sheena land. The agency wants to send them to the mission orphanage, he said finally. Says it's proper procedure. But I'm asking you, as neighbors, as Christians, to help me fight for something better. These girls deserve to know both sides of their heritage. They deserve to stay with family, both blood kin and chosen kin. A heavy silence fell. Sam felt sweat trickle down his back despite the church's chill. Then a voice called out from the back, "Let the girls sing for us again." Sam turned to find Mrs. Miles already leading the twins forward. They stood before the congregation, hands clasped together, faces solemn but unafraid. Their clear voices rose in harmony, singing the hymn their mother had taught them, part English, part Sheena words. The simple melody filled the church, pure as mountain spring water. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound of that saved a wretch like me. Sam watched faces change as the twins sang. Old Jensen, who'd been scowling earlier, dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. The storekeeper's wife pressed her hands to her heart. Even Sheriff Barlow's stern expression softened. When the last note faded, silence held for a long moment. Then Tom Wilson, whose ranch spread across the valley's north end, stood up. "I'll sign any petition you need," he declared. "Those girls belong here with their own folk." "As will I," added his wife, rising beside him. "And I'll speak to the commissioner myself if need be." Mrs. Miles stepped forward, her chin lifted. "I'll gather signatures from every woman in town. We've all seen how these children have thrived in Sam's care." More voices joined in, offering support, promising to write letters. Sam felt his chest tighten with emotion as he watched the very community that had once whispered against them now rally to their defense. The twins ran to him then, wrapping their arms around his waist. He knelt to embrace them properly, not caring who saw his tears. "Thank you," he managed to say to the congregation. "Thank you all." After the service, people lingered to sign the petition Reverend Miles had already prepared. Sam stood with the girls, accepting handshakes and words of encouragement. Even those who didn't sign offered kind words or small nods of acceptance. The sun was setting by the time they finally started home, walking since the wagon needed repairs. The girls skipped ahead on the snowy path, their breath making little clouds in the cold air. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. "Papa Sam," Martha called, running back to take his hand. "Do you think we really get to stay?" Eliza claimed his other hand, looking up at him with trust shining in her eyes. Sam gazed down at their hopeful faces, these precious souls who had brought him back to life and faith. "We've got good people standing with us now," he said softly, "and we've got the Lord's own justice on our side." They walked on together beneath the emerging stars, their hands clasped tight, their hearts full of hope. The girls began humming their hymn again, the sweet notes rising into the winter night. Sam joined in, his deeper voice harmonizing with theirs as they made their way home. Behind them, lamplight still glowed in the church windows, where Reverend Miles and his wife continued gathering signatures long into the evening. The petition grew longer with each name added, each one a testament to how love could change hearts and unite a community in the cause of true justice. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Sam made his rounds with Reverend Miles. They carried the petition from store to store, watching it grow longer with each signature. The merchant who'd once muttered about wild blood now signed without hesitation, even offering the girls peppermint sticks next time they visited. "Remarkable how things change," Reverend Miles observed, carefully folding the paper. "Yesterday's opponents become today's advocates." Sam nodded, adjusting his worn hat against the glare. "Still can't quite believe it myself. Whole town's different since Sunday." They paused outside the telegraph office, where the operator's wife was teaching her children to build a snowman. She waved warmly, reminding Sam of how Martha and Eliza had done the same just days ago. "God works in mysterious ways," the Reverend said, smiling. "Sometimes it takes children to teach adults what really matters." The afternoon wore on as they gathered more signatures. Sam's boots crunched through fresh snow, his breath clouding in the crisp air. At the livery stable, 3 ranch hands eagerly added their names. Even the blacksmith, a man of few words, made his mark with a resolute nod. "That makes 42 names," Reverend Miles counted, squinting at the page. "Nearly every adult in town." Sam felt hope rising in his chest, tempered with caution. Still got to convince the commissioner. "Numbers speak loud," the Reverend assured him, "especially when they represent united neighbors." They were heading toward the church when Sheriff Barlow appeared on his bay horse, reins held tight in gloved hands. His expression was troubled as he surveyed the street. "Evening, Sheriff," Sam said carefully, noting the man's unease. Barlow dismounted slowly, boots hitting the packed snow with deliberate care. "Sam, Reverend." He glanced at the petition visible in Miles's coat pocket. "Making progress, I see." "Care to add your name?" the Reverend asked gently. The sheriff's weathered face tightened. "Best I speak with Sam alone, if you don't mind." Reverend Miles touched Sam's shoulder before walking away, leaving the 2 men standing in the gathering dusk. Wind whistled between the buildings, carrying the scent of wood smoke. "Walk with me," Barlow said, leading his horse. They moved away from the street toward the quiet stretch behind the livery. The sheriff's spurs jingled softly with each step. Sam waited, sensing the weight of unspoken words. Finally, Barlow stopped, facing the purple mountains on the horizon. "Been doing this job 15 years, he began, voice rough. "Followed every order, enforced every paper put in front of me. Thought that made me righteous." Sam remained silent, watching the older man struggle with memories. Back in '63, got orders to clear mixed families from government land. Barlow's fingers worked the leather reins. Had to separate children from parents, send them to different territories, all legal, all proper, on paper. The wind gusted, carrying a child's distant laughter. The sheriff's shoulders tensed. "Still hear them crying," he continued quietly. "Still see mothers reaching for their little ones. All because I was following orders, being proper." Sam thought of Martha and Eliza, of their small hands clasped in prayer. Must have been hard. Hard? Barlow's laugh was bitter. Was cowardly. Could have found better ways. Could have helped them stay together. Instead, I just followed papers. He turned to face Sam, eyes haunted. "Seen those girls of yours pray. Heard them sing. Been trying to tell myself this is different, that I'm just doing my duty again." "But," Sam prompted softly, "maybe I've been wrong," Barlow admitted, the words seeming to pain him. "Wrong to enforce every paper without question. Wrong to think law books hold all the answers." Sam's heart quickened, but he kept his voice steady. Law's meant to protect, ain't it? Protect families, protect children? Supposed to. The sheriff sighed heavily. Sometimes wonder if we forget that. Get too caught up in procedures and proper channels. They stood in silence as the sun slipped lower, painting the snow in shades of rose and gold. A train whistled in the distance, its sound echoing off the mountains. Town's standing together on this, Sam said carefully. Whole community sees what's right for the girls. Barlow nodded slowly. Noticed that. Never seen folks here so united about anything. He paused, choosing his words. If enough people stand firm, well, might be hard for one sheriff to enforce removal orders, especially if he happened to be delayed by other duties. Sam felt warmth spread through his chest despite the chill air. Reckon that's true. Not saying I won't do my job, Barlow added quickly, but maybe there's more than one way to uphold the law. Maybe sometimes justice needs a longer path. He mounted his horse with practiced ease, settling into the saddle. You're giving those girls a good home, Sam. Anyone can see that. Just hope the commissioner sees it too. Sam watched him ride away, hope blooming stronger in his heart. The sheriff's words felt like another piece falling into place, another thread in the web of support growing around his small family. The walk home seemed shorter than usual, his steps lighter despite the deep snow. As he approached the cabin, warm light spilled from the windows, and the sound of girlish laughter drifted through the evening air. Inside, he found Martha and Eliza kneeling by the hearth, carefully tending to several ash cakes nestled in the coals. The cabin smelled of cornmeal and wood smoke, and something sweeter. Hope, perhaps, or the simple joy of belonging. Papa Sam, they called in unison, faces glowing in the firelight. We're making ash cakes like Mama taught us. Sam hung his coat by the door, drinking in the scene. Martha wore one of his old shirts as an apron, the sleeves rolled up countless times. Eliza had tied her hair back with a faded ribbon, her tongue poking out in concentration as she checked the cakes. Smells mighty fine, he said, moving closer to inspect their work. Your mama taught you well. She said ash cakes taste best when shared, Eliza informed him solemnly, carefully turning one with a stick. Martha nodded eagerly. And we saved the blackberry preserves, Mrs. Miles gave us. Can we use them? Reckon we can, Sam agreed, settling onto his chair by the fire. He watched them work, these two precious souls who had transformed his lonely cabin into a home filled with warmth and prayer and laughter. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future stretching beyond the next few days. He pictured summers teaching the girls to fish in the creek, winters gathered around this same hearth sharing stories. He saw them growing tall and strong, carrying their mother's wisdom and their two cultures with pride. Martha retrieved the preserves while Eliza carefully lifted the ash cakes from the coals. They settled on either side of his chair, offering him the first serving with solemn ceremony. We should pray, Martha reminded them, reaching for his calloused hand. Sam clasped both their small hands in his, bowing his head as they recited their mother's prayer, part English, part Sheena words. The familiar phrases filled the cabin with peace, and he added his own silent prayer of gratitude. Looking at their happy faces in the firelight, Sam felt certainty settle in his heart. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The town stood with them, the sheriff's conscience was awakening, and even the law might bend toward justice when enough good people joined hands. Martha carefully spread preserves on his ash cake while Eliza leaned against his knee, humming their hymn softly. Outside, snow began to fall, but inside the cabin, love and hope burned bright as the hearth fire, warming them all. The winter sky hung low and gray, promising more snow as Sam led the twins through knee-deep drifts toward the cedar grove. Martha and Eliza trudged behind him, wrapped in thick wool blankets he'd traded for in town. Their breath formed little clouds in the crisp afternoon air. Watch your step now, Sam called back, breaking trail through the fresh powder. The cedars rose before them, dark green against the white landscape. Their sharp, sweet scent filled the air. Papa Sam, Martha called, her voice muffled by her wool scarf. Why do cedars stay green when other trees sleep? Sam smiled at her curiosity. That's their nature. God made them strong against the cold. He pulled his axe from his belt. Like he made you girls strong. The twins beamed at that, standing straighter despite the cold. Sam showed them how to select good branches, ones full and green, but not so big they'd harm the tree. "Remember what your mama taught you about taking from nature?" he asked, positioning his axe. "Only what we need," Eliza recited promptly, "and give thanks after." "That's right." Sam swung the axe carefully, the sharp blade biting into the cedar wood with a solid thunk. The branch fell into the snow, releasing a burst of fragrance. They worked steadily, gathering an armful of sweet-smelling boughs. The girls helped drag them into a pile, their cheeks red with cold and effort. Sam had just finished binding the branches with twine when he heard it, the distant thunder of hoofbeats. He straightened, instantly alert. "Girls," he said quietly, "come here." They hurried to his side as 5 riders emerged from the trees. Their clothes marked them as railroad men, surveyors by the look of their equipment. The leader, a hard-faced man with iron-gray hair, reined his horse to a stop. "This is railroad land now," he announced without greeting. "You're trespassing." Sam kept his voice calm, though his hand tightened on his axe handle. "No, sir, this is public forest. Has been since before I settled here." The leader's mouth twisted. "Company bought rights to all timber within 10 miles of the proposed line. Papers were filed last week." Sam felt the twins press closer to his legs. He shifted slightly, keeping them behind him. "Wasn't notified of any sale. And we're just taking a few cedar boughs for Christmas." "I don't care if you're picking daisies," another rider cut in. "Land's private now. Clear out." Sam studied them carefully. 5 men, all armed, all wearing that particular look of those who'd grown used to taking what they wanted. But he also saw something else. Fresh pelts tied to their saddles. Beaver, by the look of them, but poorly skinned. "Seems to me," Sam said slowly, "those pelts you're carrying could fetch a better price if they were properly prepared." The leader's eyes narrowed, but with interest now rather than anger. "What's your meaning?" "I've trapped these mountains 15 years, Sam replied. "Know how to treat fur so it brings top dollar. I'd be willing to show you. Trade that knowledge for permission to gather cedar here when we need it." The men exchanged glances. The leader considered Sam for a long moment, then nodded. "Heard tell of you, the mountain man who took in Indian young'uns." Sam felt the girls tense at his sides. He rested his hands gently on their shoulders. "These are my daughters," he said firmly. Something flickered in the leader's face, surprise perhaps, or reluctant respect at Sam's tone. He dismounted, leading his horse closer. "Show me what you mean about these pelts," he said gruffly. Sam spent the next quarter hour pointing out proper skinning techniques, explaining how to stretch and cure the furs for maximum value. The other men gradually drew closer, listening with obvious interest. "Worth twice as much if you do it right," Sam concluded. "I can write down the steps if you'd like." The leader rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Reckon that knowledge is worth something." He glanced at the cedar boughs. "You can have your passage here, but mind you keep it to just what you need." "Much obliged," Sam said quietly. "We always do." The riders departed, their horses' hoofbeats fading into the winter stillness. Sam released a long breath, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. "Papa, Sam?" Martha's small voice quavered slightly. "Why were they so mean at first?" Eliza nodded earnestly. "We weren't hurting anything. Just taking cedar branches like Mama showed us." Sam knelt in the snow before them, looking into their worried faces. "Sometimes people forget what's important," he said gently. "They forget that God made us all kin, made this land for all his children to share." "But why do they forget?" Eliza persisted. "Because they let other things become more important than being kind," Sam explained. "Money, or power, or thinking they're better than others." He brushed snow from Martha's mittened hand. "But you girls remember something, every person has dignity in God's eyes. Even those men back there. That's why we treated them with respect, even when they weren't respectful to us." The twins considered this solemnly. "Like when you showed them about the pelts?" Martha asked. "That's right. Sometimes the best way to remind folks of their kindness is to show them your own." They gathered up their cedar boughs and began the trek home. The afternoon light was fading, painting long blue shadows across the snow. The girls chattered as they walked, their earlier fear forgotten in plans for decorating the cabin. Inside, the warmth of the wood stove welcomed them. Sam helped the twins shed their wet outer clothes while the snow melted from the cedar branches by the door, filling the cabin with their fresh scent. "Can we put them up now?" Eliza asked eagerly, already dragging a chair toward the wall. Sam couldn't help smiling. "Let's get them dried off first, then we'll make it proper festive in here." They worked together, carefully arranging the cedar boughs along the cabin's rough-hewn walls. The girls insisted on hanging some over the window. "So the light makes them sparkle," Martha explained. The simple decorations transformed the cabin, making it feel both sacred and celebratory. As dusk settled outside, Sam lit the lamps while the twins knelt for their evening prayers. Their small voices rose clear and sweet in the warm air. "Dear God," Martha began, "thank you for the cedar trees and for Papa Sam keeping us safe. And please help us find our grandmother," Eliza added softly. "Even though we've never met her, we know she must miss us too." Sam's heart swelled as he listened to their innocent petition. They'd never complained about not knowing their grandmother, but he heard the longing in their prayers. The same longing that drove him to gather signatures, to push against the agency's resistance, to fight for their right to know their heritage. "And please help the railroad men remember to be kind," Martha concluded, "even if they forget sometimes." "Amen," Sam whispered with them, his voice rough with emotion. The girls climbed into their bed, which Sam had built alongside his own. He tucked the quilts around them, breathing in the cedar fragrance that now filled the cabin. "Tell us about our grandmother again," Eliza requested sleepily. "What did Mama say about her?" Sam settled onto the edge of their bed. "Your Mama said she was wise in the old ways, knew about healing plants and stories that went back generations. Said she had gentle hands but a strong spirit." "Like Mama," Martha murmured, her eyes already closing. "Yes, like your Mama." Sam smoothed their dark hair. "And like you girls." He watched them drift into sleep, their faces peaceful in the lamplight. The cedar boughs cast gentle shadows on the walls, and outside, snow began falling again. Sam moved to the window, gazing out at the white darkness. Somewhere out there, a grandmother waited, perhaps praying for these same precious girls. Sam touched the cold glass, his resolve hardening like ice. Soon, he would find a way to bridge the distance between them all. Soon, these children would know all their family, the one they'd found and the one they'd been born to. But for now, the cabin held them safe and warm, wrapped in cedar branches and love and simple prayers. Sam returned to his chair by the fire, letting peace settle over him like a familiar blanket. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, in this moment, all was well. Dawn painted the agency windows with pale light as Sam straightened his collar and gripped the leather folder containing the petitions. His boots echoed on the wooden floors as he made his way to the commissioner's office. The commissioner looked up from his desk, spectacles catching the early sunlight. "Mr. Holt, back again, I see." "Yes, sir, but not alone this time." Sam placed the folder before him. "These are signed statements from townsfolk who know the girls, who've seen how they thrive in my care." The commissioner opened the folder slowly, thumbing through the pages covered in signatures. His eyebrows lifted slightly as he read testimonials from the preacher, storekeepers, and ranchers' wives. "Well, this is certainly thorough," he admitted. "Perhaps we should—" The door swung open and an army officer strode in, brass buttons gleaming. "Commissioner Davis, I trust you haven't forgotten regulations regarding Indian children." His voice carried the hard edge of authority. "The mission school awaits their transfer." Sam's jaw tightened. These girls have living kin, their grandmother on Sheena land. They deserve— "Regulations are clear," the officer cut in. "Until proper documentation." A commotion in the outer office interrupted him. The door opened again, revealing Reverend Miles leading a group of townspeople. Ranchers, still in their work clothes, stood beside women in their Sunday best. The preacher's wife carried yet another stack of papers. "Begging your pardon," Reverend Miles said firmly, "but we've come to speak for these children." The commissioner adjusted his spectacles, clearly startled by the crowd filling his office. "This is most irregular." "Maybe so," a rancher's wife spoke up, "but those girls sing in our church now. They're part of our town." Others nodded, murmuring agreement. The preacher stepped forward, laying more signatures on the desk. "We're asking you to consider what's right, not just what's written in your books." The commissioner glanced from the petitions to the determined faces before him. Even the army officer shifted uncomfortably under the united gaze of the townspeople. After a long moment, the commissioner cleared his throat. Perhaps we can postpone the transfer, at least until we've made proper inquiries about the grandmother. Sam released the breath he'd been holding, feeling hope surge in his chest. I'll send a rider to the Sheena lands today, the commissioner continued. If the grandmother can be found and verified, we'll consider her claim. He raised a hand as the army officer began to protest. The law also speaks of kinship rights, Captain. We'll honor those first. The townspeople smiled, several patting Sam's shoulder as they filed out. The matter wasn't settled. Not yet. But for the first time, Sam felt the weight of isolation lift. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. The days crept by like molasses in winter. Sam found himself checking the horizon more often than usual, hoping to spot a rider with news about the girl's grandmother. Each morning, he would step onto the porch, coffee cup steaming in the dawn air, and scan the valley below. The waiting gnawed at him worse than any hunger he had known. But life at the cabin settled into comfortable rhythms. Sam discovered teaching the twins brought him unexpected joy. One crisp morning, he showed them how to repair his beaver traps, their small hands mimicking his movements as he demonstrated the proper way to oil the springs and test the mechanisms. Like this, Papa Sam? Martha asked, carefully working the metal parts. That's right, he nodded, pride warming his chest. Gentle now, just like I showed you. The girls proved quick studies, whether mending traps or learning to identify animal tracks in the snow. Their eagerness reminded Sam of his own childhood, and stories began spilling from him like water from a spring thaw. When I was barely older than you two, he told them one evening as they sat by the fire, my pa taught me to read weather in the clouds. Said a man who knows the sky never gets caught in a storm unprepared. Eliza leaned forward, firelight dancing in her eyes. Tell us more about when you were little. So Sam shared tales of his youth, learning to track deer, getting lost in fog, and finding his way home by moss on trees, the first time he successfully set a trap line alone. The twins hung on every word, and Sam found himself remembering details he thought long buried. Their songs became part of each day's end. As darkness gathered outside, their clear voices would rise in hymns their mother had taught them, filling the cabin with a peace Sam had nearly forgotten could exist. Sometimes he caught himself humming their tunes while working outside. One night, a fierce storm howled around the cabin. Wind rattled the shutters like angry fists, and snow hissed against the windows. The twins huddled closer to the fire, jumping at each thunderous gust. Papa Sam? Martha's voice was small against the storm's fury. Will you always keep us? Sam set down his whittling and drew both girls onto his lap. The question squeezed his heart, knowing how much uncertainty they had already faced in their young lives. His voice grew thick with emotion as he answered. As long as I draw breath, he promised solemnly, holding them close. You're my girls now, and that's how it'll stay. They snuggled against him, and soon their giggles rose above the storm's growl as Sam told funny stories about his first attempts at cooking. Outside, winter raged, but within their snug cabin, warmth and laughter created a shelter stronger than logs and chinking. Sam realized that waiting for news didn't seem quite so hard anymore, not with his family beside him. The crunch of horse hooves in snow drew Sam to the window. His heart quickened at the sight of a rider approaching, a woman wrapped in a thick wool shawl, her silver hair gleaming in the winter sun. Even before she dismounted, Sam knew who she must be. The twins were helping him sort dried herbs when Knuckles rapped softly on the cabin door. Sam opened it to find Grandmother Waya standing tall despite her years, dignity written in every line of her weathered face. Her dark eyes met his steadily, measuring him in that moment. Grandmother! The twins' cry split the air. They rushed forward, wrapping themselves in her skirts like morning glories climbing a fence. The old woman's stern expression melted as she gathered them close, murmuring words in her native tongue. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she touched their faces, tracing features that must have reminded her of her lost daughter. Sam stood back, his throat tight. He had known this day would come, had tried to prepare himself for it. These past months of joy would become memory, but at least the girls would be with their true family. He gripped the door frame, steadying himself. But Grandmother Waya raised her eyes to his, and what he saw there wasn't judgment or anger. With one hand still cradling her granddaughters, She reached out and placed her other hand firmly on Sam's shoulder. Her touch carried the weight of authority of years of wisdom. "You kept them alive," she said, her voice rich and deep, "when others would have let them die. You are chosen to be their father." She squeezed his shoulder. "The Creator guided their steps to your door." Sam's vision blurred as the twins broke free to embrace them both, creating a circle of arms and tears and laughter. The grandmother's blessing fell over them like gentle rain, washing away months of uncertainty. That evening they gathered around Sam's table, sharing a feast of venison stew and cornbread. The cabin glowed with warmth as Grandmother Waya raised her hands, offering prayers of thanksgiving in both Sheena and English. Her words filled the space with power and peace, blessing the household and the bonds that now united them. The twins sat between Sam and their grandmother, their faces shining with joy. Martha slipped her small hand into Sam's, while Eliza leaned against Grandmother Waya's arm. Outside, snow began to fall, but inside the cabin, a family that had been scattered was finally whole. Spring painted the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and green, the evening light softening the rugged peaks that Sam had once thought would forever be his only companions. Now, as he sat at his wooden table, the cabin glowed with the warmth of kerosene lamplight and something far more precious, the sound of family. Martha and Eliza huddled near the window, their dark heads bent together as they sorted through paper packets of seeds. "Papa Sam," Martha called out, her voice bright with excitement, "can we plant the beans tomorrow?" "Grandmother says the moon is right." "And carrots too?" Eliza added, bouncing on her toes. "We could make your favorite soup come harvest time." From her rocking chair in the corner, Grandmother Waya hummed an ancient Sheena melody, her skilled fingers weaving a basket from fresh willow stems. The familiar tune wrapped around them like a warm blanket, mixing with the spring breeze that carried the scent of pine through the open window. Sam looked around his cabin, once a sparse shelter now transformed. Children's drawings brightened the log walls, a collection of herbs dried from the ceiling rafters, gathered by both grandmother and granddaughters. Their mother's shawl, carefully mended, draped across the girls' shared bed. Every corner held evidence of the miracle that had changed his life. "Time for supper," Sam announced, setting down the last plate. The twins scrambled to their places, automatically folding their hands. Grandmother Waya set aside her weaving and joined them, her presence adding dignity to their simple table. Sam bowed his head, feeling the weight of blessing in his heart. "Thank you, Lord," he began, his voice steady and sure where it had once been rusty with disuse, "for everyday miracles. For bringing light to dark places and for making a family from strangers." "Amen," the twins chorused, then dissolved into giggles as they reached for the cornbread. Through the window, the eternal mountains stood purple against the evening sky, unchanged as they had been since creation. But within these walls, everything had changed. His home rang with laughter, prayers, and the chatter of children planning tomorrow's adventures. The silence that had once felt like a shield now seemed as distant as last winter's snow. Sam watched his daughters, for that's truly what they were now, share a private joke across the table. Their eyes sparkled in the lamplight, and their joy filled every corner of the cabin. His solitude was gone forever, replaced by something far richer. A family bound by love, faith renewed through trial, and a future brighter than any he could have imagined. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.